We'll now bring up Matt Duss from the Foundation for Middle East Peace. He serves as president of the foundation. Previously, he was a policy analyst at the Center for American Progress, where his work focused on Middle East and U.S. national security, and he was director of the Center's Middle East Progress Program. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and I thank you for the opportunity to share these views on an issue of real importance in U.S. foreign policy. But before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the tragic and horrific attack that took place yesterday in Tel Aviv, which took the lives of 4 innocent civilians, and send my sympathies and support and solidarity to the victims and their families. As I know all of you do, I look forward to the day when this conflict is ended and the people of Israel and Palestine live together in peace and security. The U.S. and Israel have long been close partners in a relationship built upon strategic interests and shared democratic ideals. It is a relationship that is enduring and unwavering. For decades, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has been one of the world's most intractable problems, one with serious implications for U.S. interests. Successive American administrations, Democratic and Republican, have seen resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as a key U.S. national security goal in the Middle East. There's no question that we should be and will be Israel's friend in resolving this conflict. At the same time, we must recognize that Israel's continued occupation of Palestinian territories and its daily restrictions on the most basic political and civil liberties of the Palestinian people run contrary to fundamental American values. We must reject the idea that we have to sacrifice our values in order to stand with our allies. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is also a continuing source of regional resentment that hinders the U.S.'s relationships in the region, creating a deep well of resentment from which extremists draw freely and profitably. As General James Mattis, the former head of U.S. Central Command, put it in a 2013 interview, I paid a military security price every day as commander of CENTCOM because the Americans were seen as biased in support of Israel, unquote. A final peace agreement must ultimately be negotiated and agreed to by Israelis and Palestinians themselves, but the United States can and must do more to help create the conditions under which such negotiations can succeed. This must be done with a commitment to Israel's legitimate security concerns, but it must also focus on securing the Palestinians' inalienable rights through the creation of an economically viable and independent Palestinian state. Democratic Party policy toward Israel and Palestine should reflect the values of inclusiveness, security, democracy, justice, and freedom. A two-state solution is the best way to support all of these values to ensure the continued existence of the State of Israel and secure the rights of the Palestinian people in a state of their own. In the absence of that solution, however, and in a continuing situation of occupation, Palestinians have rights under international humanitarian law that must be recognized and protected. I'll conclude here by noting that this conflict is one of the most emotionally fraught in U.S. politics. It also touches on the deeply held religious and ethical views of millions of Americans, including myself. It involves the legitimate historical claims, identities, and security of two peoples in the same land. One of the most elegant reflections on this matter was offered by President Obama himself in his remarks to the Duss Israel congregation in May 2015. Quote, "The rights I insist upon and now fight for all people here in the United States compels me then to stand up for Israel and look out for the rights of the Jewish people. And the rights of the Jewish people then compel me to think about a Palestinian child in Ramallah that feels trapped without opportunity," unquote. As President Obama noted, these ideas are based in the same shared values that impel us to condemn anti-Semitic bigotry, support Israel's security, and seek justice for Palestinians. These are the ideas that should be reflected in the Democratic Party's platform, and the values of inclusiveness, security, democracy, justice, and freedom should inform not only America's engagement with Israel and Palestine, but with the region and the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Matt? No? Yeah?
I'd just like you to reflect on the ironies that strikes me about our right obsession with Trump, right-wing, xenophobic, narcissistic, neo-fascist, and Trump-like figures in Israeli life, Lieberman, Ariel. Every society has xenophobes. Why is it that we could focus so clearly on the xenophobes here and rightly call them into question, and at times seem to be so reluctant to call into question xenophobes in other places, not just Israel, but other places as well when it comes to U.S. foreign policy. That just strikes me as something that we as a people have to come to terms with. I can put it another way, that if there were a Palestinian occupation of precious Jewish brothers and sisters, would we respond in the same way as opposed to an Israeli occupation of Palestinian brothers and sisters? And myself, believing very deeply in what Jane Austen calls constancy, moral consistency, that I want to have moral outrage in both of those cases. And it just strikes me, this is something we have to wrestle with. It's going to take a little while, I think, but it's something we have to wrestle with both in the party and the society.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. West. That's a really important point. I would say some of the troubling trends we're seeing in Israel, they're not isolated to Israel. We see them across the world, across the region, in our own country.
Absolutely.
I would just say a way of thinking that often guides my work is a comment I heard from an Israeli colleague who was very close to the negotiations, who said about the United States, we're not asking the United States to make peace for us. We're asking the United States to help those of us Israelis and Palestinians who want to make peace to do it. And I think that is a really helpful guide for how we should design policy.
Thank you. Wendy?
Thank you for your testimony, and thank you for your strong support for a two-state solution. I think, we had an earlier discussion here, and I think that is a place where we are all in agreement that it needs to be a two-state solution that provides security to a democratic Jewish state of Israel, and also ensures a Palestinian state that also has security and dignity. And getting there, as you imply, is really something to be negotiated between Israel and the Palestinians, with the United States playing the role we have traditionally played because it is in our national security interest to do so. And I think, to Dr. West, to your point, everything that we do in the world as the United States should be in our national security interest, and values are certainly part of our identity and our national security interest. And it is why people have worked so hard to try to, over multiple administrations, to get to a two-state solution and to get to peace. And I think that think that it is very important in addition, and I think you were saying this in your testimony, I just want to affirm it's the case, that, and it also goes to your point, Dr. West, that we need to make sure that there is not Islamophobia, there is not anti-Semitism, there is not racism, and that unlike Mr. Trump, well, I guess it's something. Maybe it's Mr. Trump, owns that, has bought the hotel. That unlike Mr. Trump, who has fueled all of those, I believe, we are in a very different place.
Thank you for that. Yes, reaffirming the two-state solution I think is very important. I think it's also important to note, as you just did, we often hear Israeli security, Palestinian sovereignty. Palestinians need security as well. This is something that both peoples deserve. I think it's quite right that ultimately this is between Israelis and Palestinians who come to that final agreement. But I think there is a role to play for the international community. I think as we saw in the P5+1 Iran negotiations, which I'm happy to have the opportunity to thank you for your excellent work in doing, which I think was an enormous achievement. The role that the U.S. played in marshaling, cultivating, and mobilizing international consensus to achieve solutions to a shared problem is the way that the U.S. should go about its work as a global leader. And I think there are some lessons we can draw from that for how we might share some of the challenges in finally getting to an Israeli-Palestinian peace.
Thank you, Matt Duss. And now we'll move to our next testimony.